Is doing this Let's Talk Tropes topic an excuse to talk about a character from a series that I just finished? Yes. Do I feel bad about that? Absolutely not. Hello everybody, my name is Danny, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the latest installment of Let's Talk Tropes. I haven't done one of these in a couple of months, and this is actually a topic I meant to cover almost a year ago, because I did a Let's Talk Tropes about prosthetic limbs, and I talked about wanting to talk about, that was a weird way to phrase that, but I want to do more Let's Talk Tropes about tropes involving disabilities, and then I just never did. But today we will be talking about the blind master trope, which blindness is a disability, so I'm finally fulfilling that idea of mine. So the blind master trope is pretty self-explanatory. It involves a character who is blind, but they are a master of some sort of like physical activity or form of combat, and they tend to have this unique sense or ability that their seeing counterparts don't have, and this sense or ability gives them an edge on their seeing counterparts and allows them not only to match them, but oftentimes surpass them. And I have 6 characters that I want to talk about for this trope, so why don't we get into it? So first up, we have Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, who is from Marvel Comics, and he is perhaps the most famous example of this trope, at least in my opinion. He debuted in the comics in 1960s and has been in numerous TV and film adaptations since, most recently becoming a member of the MCU as of Spider-Man No Way Home. And he was not born blind, but became blind after an accident in his childhood. There was like a car accident, and there were like radioactive chemicals involved that got into his eyes and made him lose his vision, and doing so also heightened his senses of smell and hearing and things like that. And he also has what is called radar sense, which allows him to like feel vibrations in the air, kind of like echolocation, and tell the distance between himself and other things surrounding him. What I really like about this character is that he's not just a fighter. Like, it's obviously a pretty big part of his character because he's Daredevil, but like that's not the only thing about him. He's also a lawyer, and so during the daytime he has this job as like an upstanding citizen fighting crime, but then at night he's also this like vigilante doing the same thing but in a different way, and I think that's a really cool dynamic and adds some depth to him. Next up, we have a character from Quest for Camelot, which was one of my favorite movies as a child, and that character is Garrett. Garrett was also not born blind. He lived in the castle of Camelot and took care of the horses, and one day, when a fire broke out in the stable, he went to help the horses and keep them from dying. One was spooked and kicked him in the head, and it gradually caused him to lose his vision. But one of the knights still saw this promise in him and trained Garrett in the ways of the knight and sword fighting and stuff like that. But then one day that knight was killed, and Garrett lost all hope and withdrew into the forest to live alone. There he became acquainted with a falcon who kind of acts as his eyes and warns him of any dangers he can't sense on his own. He's not the most revolutionary character, but little Danny was so in love with him that I couldn't do this trope and not talk about him. Next up, we have the character that is the reason why I wanted to do this trope in the first place, and that is Shion from Hell's Paradise. Hell's Paradise is a manga that I literally just finished reading this morning, and it was so good. Shion is one of my favorite characters. Unlike the two I previously talked about, he was in fact born blind, but his mother, who was like a street con artist, performing artist kind of person, decided that he didn't look the part of the like blind sword prodigy, and so she scarred his face to make it seem like the blindness came from something else, and he then became a member of the Yamada Asemon, I believe is how it's pronounced, which is an elite group of samurai executioners. Shion has an incredible sense of smell and an incredible sense of hearing, but he also sees what he calls waves, which is just his way of referring to Tao, or the life force that is in everything around him, and because he can sense this, he can essentially see the things around him without actually seeing. He's very much a stickler for the rules at the beginning of the series, but he then grows a little bit softer and lets himself be more guided by emotions than strict logic and rules by the end of the series. And one little detail that I absolutely love is that the only thing he regrets about his blindness in that situation is that he can't cry because when his mother scarred his face, it destroyed his tear ducts, and so he's not able to properly mourn the death of his friend. And I think it's such an emotional moment when he's having this thought process. It absolutely destroyed me. And I apologize for the pronunciation of this next one because I'm probably gonna get it wrong, but the next character I want to talk about is Chirrut Imwe from the Star Wars universe. He is seen in the movie Rogue One. I don't think I pronounced that correctly, but I don't know how else I would pronounce it. He is a rebel and he's part of the team that is sent to recover the plans for the Death Star in order to help take down Palpatine and the Empire. And he is blind, hence why I'm talking about him in this video, but he's very in tune with the Force despite not being Force sensitive. And his mantra that he repeats several times throughout the movie is "I am one with the Force and the Force is with me." He fights with both a staff and a bowcaster, which is pretty much the Star Wars equivalent of a crossbow, and I think it's pretty cool that he has two different weapons that he uses, and he's kind of just a stereotypical example of this trope, and I wanted to talk about him for a little bit. Next up, I do have a spoiler for the book Graceling by Kristen Cashore, so if you have not read that yet, and you would like to read it without spoilers, definitely skip this part of the video, but if you don't care or you've already read it, play on. The character I want to talk about is Poe. He is a prince from a kingdom not where the story takes place. He's got one gold eye and one silver eye, marking him as a Graceling. And at first, his grace is believed to be fighting, but it is later revealed that it's more of a perception thing where he can tell where things are around him and even sense people's thoughts when they are thinking about him, which I think is such a cool power to have. And this perception allows him to keep his blindness a secret from pretty much everybody, even the reader, and it's only when Katza, the main character of the book, is having a conversation with him and she notices that he's not looking at her the way a seeing person would look in a conversation that she's like, "Oh my god, you're blind, aren't you?" And I think it's a really cool moment of reveal, and I really like it. And finally, we come to the only female character on this list, which is not my favorite thing, but I really couldn't find any other female characters that truly embodied this trope the way this character does, and that character is Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender. She is blind from birth, and her family kind of babies her for it, and they think she's helpless and can't take care of herself, but despite this upbringing, she really kills it and becomes the greatest earthbender pretty much of all time. She starts off as the earthbending wrestler, the blind bandit, who is just the coolest character ever. She becomes Aang's earthbending teacher, and she also invents metal bending, which, that's amazing. The way she sees is through her feet, so when she's in contact with physical earth, she can sense the vibrations through the earth to see anything else that is touching it. And of course, this has drawbacks because she can't see when her feet aren't touching the earth. She can't see things that aren't also touching it, and also, in one case, her feet get burned, and so she, even when she's walking, loses this ability to see through the earth. And I really like this aspect of it because it shows that she is disabled, and even though she has this amazing ability that allows her to kind of overcome this disability, it's not infallible. She is still a person with flaws and issues and things that she has to deal with, and it just makes her strengths and achievements feel that much more amazing and realistic. And those are the 6 characters that I wanted to talk about for the blind master trope. Let me know down in the comments if you have other characters you think of when you think of this trope. I definitely would love to see more use of it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!